Hello and welcome to the long awaited follow up to my reasons why I'm excited about the Wheel of Time Season 2 video. I guess better late than never, hey? In this video, I will list the 14 things that I was looking forward to in Season 2 and talk a bit about whether I think they hit or they didn't. Once I've gone through the list, I'll give you my final thoughts on Season 2, which I think everyone has had a decent amount of time now to really land. I know there was a lot of thinking, how do I feel about it? A lot of questioning, a lot of deliberation, with the general consensus being that Season 2 was much better than Season 1. But I'll give you my thoughts on where I landed finally, and then I'll get to the exciting part where I tell you exactly why you were right in your opinion about Season 2. So, without any further ado, let's hit my list. Number 1 was Paden Fane's evolution. Now, this one, unfortunately, was a miss. Despite the excellent performance by Johann Myers, Paden Fane continues to be grossly underutilized in the show. The scenes that he's in don't really make sense. I don't like the fact that he's offering up the dagger. Never mind the fact that he was ordered by Ishamael, but it's just so out of character and so against what the dagger does. It is a criminal misuse of a fantastic character. My original reason for getting excited about Paden Fane's evolution was that image we got in the promo material of the Fade nailed up to that door. But unfortunately, that really didn't come to anything. The entire chase that Perrin gives after Paden Fane, after he'd stolen the dagger, is a bit of a nothing burger because he just shows up in Folmay and there's no real connecting tissue giving the scenes with Perrin and the Saldeans any kind of impetus to move forward. They're just running around and they find a thing. So Paden Fane unfortunately goes in the strike column. Number 2 was Rand's swordsmanship. As the season rolled along, I started becoming more and more sure that I was not going to get a Blade Master showdown at the end of Season 2, despite us knowing that Turak was going to be in it. When the only real references to sword forms came from Lan randomly referencing Cat crossing the courtyard and a crazy old swordmaster waving a stick around in a hallway, when those were the only references to the sword forms, I knew Rand was not going to be up to snuff by the time he got to the end of the season. And I knew that either something like a channeling event was going to have to happen or they were going to skip the showdown altogether. The actual channeling that Rand did against the Sean Chan, I like the weave. It's actually very similar to some of the weaves that I've imagined from the later books, and therein lies the problem. Rand struggling to use Saidin for the duration of the show thus far, and then channeling such a potent weave against those swordsmen and Turak, and then right at the end being reduced to just really pushing a sword through Ishamael's chest is really uneven. Like, is Rand a good channeler or not? So his swordsmanship let me down, and his channeling was a bit of a non-event as well. Number 3 was the Horn of Valir. It was there. It looked cool. I know a lot of people didn't like the way it looked, but I like the fact that it looked alien and weird, and that was great. But what I was really looking forward to is a bit of like lore exposition on what the significance of the horn is, the role of the horn sounder, Arthur Hawkwing and the heroes of the horn. This Sean Chan presence opens the door for talk about Arthur Hawkwing, you know. It's just baffling that they just put the horn in there and Matt blows it and these people appear. And even then, I feel like the battle that they were involved in was also really low stakes, low key. A couple of soldiers up on the castle walls, bit of a waste. Yeah, didn't quite get the payoff that I wanted from the Horn of Valir. Number 4 was Dasamar. Okay, points to the show for mentioning it, and the Kyrenian made out to be particularly adept at it, but I never really saw it employed effectively. You could make the argument that Barthanes was a political animal, willing to make a deal with dark friends to further his political career, but there was no cleverness to it. Maybe his mother sort of entrapping him and basically bringing about his demise could be painted as that, but again, a little underused and not quite the payoff that I was looking for. Number 5 was the Aiel, which we did get. This was hit and miss. I mean, I like the fact that the Aiel are obviously crazy warriors and like fantastic badasses when it comes to fighting, but a pet peeve of mine in movies and media in general is when they crank up the fighting so much that it actually becomes a little bit laughable, like man on a wire type things, or in this case, woman on a wire, obviously. So the fight with Avienda and Perrin against the White Cloaks felt unnecessarily staged. They didn't really represent a true reflection of how badass the Aiel are without being showy or show off. I don't know how to explain it. It didn't feel right to me. I love seeing Bane and Triad, but unfortunately no Urian or Ruach or Gaul, which is a pity. I love all those characters, and not because that I prefer the male characters over the females. In fact, I love the maidens more than any other group of Aiel, except maybe the wise ones who are also women. But what I was really looking forward to was the banter between the maidens and the male warrior societies. Ruach and Bane and Triad make for fantastic viewing, well, reading in the book, and it really would have played well on screen. So it's a pity we didn't get that. And then, the Aiel got done dirty by some of the worst day for night shots that I've seen since A Few Dollars More, or some of those old spaghetti westerns, right? Where you can tell they shot the scenes in the day and just turned down the exposure or turned down the brightness. It was laughably bad. And lastly, I did not enjoy the depiction of Jiito. I think it loosely falls within the boundaries of what it is, but the execution to me felt ham-fisted, not subtle at all. Number 6 was the White Cloaks. And here I actually enjoyed quite a bit of it. Eamon Valda has always been the comic book villain, right? Like he is the bad guy, capital B, capital G, right? There's no doubting what his motives are and that he is a bad guy. And Dane Bornald got a much more nuanced portrayal. I actually really enjoyed this version of Dane Bornald. Dane Bornald in the books is also a bit of a comic book villain, just a hateful character from the very beginning. And this portrayal was actually really great. I really enjoyed the nuance that it introduced. I was also glad to see that Perrin actually killed Jeffrem Bornald, which was one of my predictions, and it played out. I think it gives Perrin and the White Cloaks a much more solid rivalry and relationship, where in the books it's a little more tenuous, all based on misunderstanding. Here he killed Jeffrem Bornald. And the last thing I'll say about the White Cloaks is that in the books, Jeffrem Bornald's tactics, despite being a lauded general, in the books, his tactics for marching on Falme were laughable. The children just advance at a trot, in a long line. Here they had some semblance of a plan with, creating a literal smokescreen to hide their advance. But the mechanics of that were also just like laugh out loud funny. A couple of kids with some smoking bowls walking towards an entire city and hiding an army was not believable. I'm sorry. I like the idea, but the execution again let them down. Number 7 was Perrin's development. Unfortunately, a bit of a miss here as well. We get some more of Perrin's powers here, quite different from how they are in the books. And I don't mind different, but again, I'm just not a fan of how it came across on the screen. I don't know what the purpose of Perrin's visions in the abandoned village were. I didn't enjoy that. I enjoyed the Hopper connection though, and the fact that Hopper was killed by a White Cloak. That was on script, so to speak, and I did enjoy that. But Perrin's still a bit of a nothing burger as well, just walking around in literal circles. Number 8 was the Forsaken. Home run. Loved it. Lanfear had a couple weird weaves sewing a woman's mouth shut, or like that wasn't quite, it doesn't fit within my own idea of the metaphysics of the one power, but that's a problem I can get over. Lanfear's characterization though was spot on. I loved it. Ishamael continues to rule that show. Fantastic character, great portrayal, and their interplay, Lanfear and Ishamael, was a wonderful surprise. I loved it. It was really, really great. And then we got a whole bunch of name drops as well. One of the things I was looking forward to is maybe a name drop. Maybe the presence of Teleron Riard gives us a door to introduce Moghedian, or at least say her name. And boom, we actually get to see her. Now, they did our girl a bit dirty as well with some pretty asinine writing. I like that they're making her very weird and kooky and strange. Obviously, they have to set the characters apart quite a lot, both visually and in their personalities. But it was a bit over the top. It was a bit on the nose. But in saying that, we saw her, and that was great. And the fact that they mentioned Samael and the boys is also great. We can speculate until next season or the season after that about who the boys are and which Forsaken are going to get culled. But yeah, just the fact that they are all in the mix now immediately is great. Love that. Number 9 was Egwene's arc. Now, I think everyone can agree that Egwene had her time to shine in this season, her capture as a Damane and then her escape, although again via some dubious metaphysics and rule breaking. Collaring a collared person, like a circular collaring with the Adam, is an unexplored phenomenon. It was a little bit weird, but what it did convey was Egwene's steely determination not to be broken. All in all, I am happy with what Egwene achieved in that section. So big tick for Egwene's arc. Number 10 was Elaine. That's another hit. Loved Elaine. Elaine is such a great character in the books. I was really hoping that they would lean more into her sort of investigative prowess that she shows in the books. But yeah, I guess she did figure out that the girls were leaving and she tracked them down. I even like the fact that they highlighted her proclivity to imbibe. In the books, there are a couple of funny scenes where she starts drinking for the first time. And here they lean heavily into it with her making wine in the bedroom or whatever that ale or cider was that they made, which is really great. And the key Elaine personality trait of her loyalty and her sense of honor was also front and center in the show, which is absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed Elaine's portrayal and everything about it, really. Then number 11 was Matt. Also a bit of a mixed bag. Matt continues to have the best lines in the show. He is entertaining. He is fun to watch. Donald Finn does a fantastic job. Took over in a very tough position, taking over a role from who I thought was the best actor in the first season. Barney Harris knocked it out of the park for me. Donald Finn is different, but still likable and enjoyable. Very much enjoyed his portrayal and enjoyed Matt as a character, but not getting his memories from the Finn. I don't know if the tea that he drank with Ishamahal and the combination of the horn blowing is supposed to give him all his memories. I hope that they can convey that concept adequately in the show. It is such a weird abstract thing. I mean, how do you show that someone has memories of 1,000 men? You know, it's a tricky thing to pull off, but I did not like the dagger being tied to a stick, the Shadow Logoth dagger tied to a stick, standing in for the Ashandari or the Ashandarai. It's a weird sort of literally taped together solution for a problem that I don't think they needed to solve at that point. Number 12, dual classing Nynaeve. That was a miss, I'm afraid. Nynaeve was way overpowered in the first season, and in this season they hinted at her using swords and things to sort of, maybe not rely on the power so much, and then she couldn't channel at all. Spent a whole episode sitting next to Elaine on the ground with a crossbow bolt in her leg, and never really used the sword play that she demonstrated in the White Tower training scene. So miss and miss. They managed to miss on two things with one character that they introduced. So disappointing again. Number 13 is Rand's channeling, which I sort of hinted at before. I liked that he struggled to kill that Fade that attacked him in Lanfear, because he is so not used to using the one power and like doing a slow burning death instead of shattering it to pieces or, sending it to its doom via a death gate or something. That really worked, but that channeling event with Turak was way too overpowered for him. For a guy who's struggling to just hold on to Saidin, that was a very complex weave. And then he didn't use the power at all against Ishamahal. And I know that in the books it's also a sword fight, but here everyone else around Rand is channeling, and Rand just walks forward with the sword and suddenly stabs Ishamahal in the chest, who just lets him after a pretty piss poor attempt at beating them by Ishamahal as well, just using the same weaves over and over and over again, just battering down their shield. It was a bit lame. And then lastly, number 14 was Ingtar, which unfortunately was a huge miss. Apparently there was a scene cut from the show where Ingtar actually talks about letting the Shadowspawn into Sildaya, being a dark friend and wanting to redeem himself. But what made it into the show was nothing, really. He even unfortunately makes a comment in Falme about how this position, one man can hold off many because of the alleyway and everything. And then in the very next scene is proceeded to be killed by one of the first three guys that come up at him. So even in the writing in the show, it has contradicted itself. And we never got that absolutely heart-wrenching scene with Ingtar coming back to the light and Rand seeing him off. And I know Rand wasn't with him in the show, but anyone else could have given him that really sweet Saldaean sign-off. So what do we have here overall with season 2? I feel like it's not as bad as some people are making it out, but it's certainly not great. It is, at the end of the day, a fun, middling fantasy show that is never going to reach the heights of a Game of Thrones, which unfortunately set all of our expectations really, really high. Everyone that is excited about the show because they read the books were enamored with the books. You know, we are besotted with the books. Many of the fans in the fandom are absolutely gaga over the books. And so to have some people just lap up everything that the show is putting in front of them is completely understandable. I still adore the world, and I will continue to watch the show because it is set in a world that I care for so much. But am I going to get my hopes up again? No. Was this season an 8? No. Was it a 6? Also no. Maybe a 7, 6.8 if we want to split hairs about it. But it's never going to get better than that. You can tell from what we've gotten so far. You can extrapolate and see what we're going to get in the future. So I'm hoping that I can enjoy it. And then finally, I hope that everyone else can enjoy it. And what I promised in the beginning was to tell you why you were right about season 2 of The Wheel of Time. And that might sound like a cop-out to you, but the bottom line is the creators of the show are making a piece of art, and everyone's reaction to that piece of art is correct and valid. You can hate it for the reasons that you hate it. You can love it for the reasons that you love it. But what you should not do is try and force other people into your point of view. You can point out the obvious flaws to as many people as you want, and they are unlikely to change their minds. People that love the show are going to love it regardless. And people that hate the show are not going to be brought around either. So maybe tone down the hate speech and the bigotry and the attacks on social media. And I'm not just talking about the showrunners and the actors, but between the fandom, using terms like book cloak and shill and that sort of thing is not constructive. You can put your opinion out there, but I mean, that is just your opinion, and all of us are entitled to ours. So there you have it. This is probably the last video that I will make about the TV show. We make a lot of content about the books. Obviously, we're still busy with our reread. So if you want to go have some actual fun, if you're not a fan of the show, but you love the books and you've read them all, do check out our podcast because we are reading them all again. And we are doing full spoiler discussions about every single chapter, going into every little bit of nitty-gritty detail. And we have a lot of contributions from the fandom and from our listeners as well, which really makes it more like a two-way conversation rather than a one-way delivery of our half-baked ideas. So listen to the podcast, which you can find on any podcast app, and go to the website and send us a message, leave us a voice message, and join in the conversation. And with that, as we say on the podcast, sleep well and wake.